one candidate from Durham University swept to victory with this rather unusual pitch to his fellow students.
Hi, I'm Tom Harwood and I'm running to be an NUS delegate at this year's Hong Kong conference. Here are the pledges that I'm going to deliver for you. I pledge to construct a giant statue of NUS President Malia Buatia so that students in Durham can see how vitally important the NUS is to us. It's time for change. I pledge to cut back the foliage so that our beautiful Students' Union building is even more visible.
I pledge to make sweeping agrarian reform, a national priority.
Vote for me to take out the rubbish. To take out the rubbish.
Wow.
I am the only candidate who has pledged to defeat ISIS using NUS boycotts. But seriously, if you vote for me, I'll vote against all irrelevant, grandstanding, self-aggrandising, self-defeating NUS policies that only serve to discredit students as a whole.
And Tom Harwood, who won the election as a delegate from Durham to the NUS conference, thanks in part to that campaign video, joins us now. Well, congratulations. But you're obviously trying to poke fun at the current state of student politics. What are your issues?
I think my issue is that the NUS doesn't represent students anymore, and it hasn't done for a long time. It's run by a group of people, a very narrow group of people who come from an even narrower spectrum of opinion, and they're in no way representing the issues that actually matter to students.
Right, so you're trying to undermine the NUS with your sort of, I suppose, vote to be a delegate.
I think they do a very good job at undermining themselves, to be honest, with their banning of newspapers on campuses around the country, with their boycotting of Coca-Cola because they have factories in Israel, with their issues that they focus on that have nothing to do with the actual lives of students. And I'm really trying to highlight that.
But students must have supported some of those issues, otherwise they wouldn't have become law via the NUS.
Yeah, that's a very good point. The NUS often sees itself as a kind of legislature. They don't realise that they're just a kind of irrelevant student body. And most students see it as that. If you look at the turnouts in student elections around the country, it's about 4% of people who bother to turn out. At Durham, we've had delegates sent who have identical opinions for years and years and years. And as soon as I ran my campaign this year, turnout was up 300% because people actually, kind of when they're offered a change, they go for it because people really don't care about the NUS at all on universities.
But actually, students have always campaigned on global issues, whether or not they could affect change. I mean, that is what being a student and interested in student politics is all about. And many heads of the NUS have gone on to be politicians, for example. I mean, what's wrong with that?
Nothing's wrong with campaigning on global issues if you're a student, but I would say that you need to pick the avenue to do it. And don't pretend to be representing all students if you're trying to push forward your own narrow agenda, using the NUS as this kind of soapbox for your quite radical views.
Right, well, plus ça change, I suppose you could say in that regard. But what are you actually going to do then? Are you going to put your money where your mouth is and actually go along to conference and say all this?
Absolutely. I think what I said during the campaign was that as long as we're in the NUS, I'm going to work as hard as I can to make it ever so slightly less terrible. And the way I'm going to do that is by pushing forward some democratic reforms. Hopefully, we'll be able to get one member, one vote through. At the moment, only delegates can vote for the president, so you get people that are really unrepresentative. The current president has faced accusations of anti-Semitism and has said some really quite distasteful things in the past, calling the University of Birmingham a Zionist outpost, for example. I hope that if every student has given the opportunity to vote for a president, perhaps we'll have some more representative people.
Right. What do you think of Tom's view of the NUS? Has it become an out-of-touch organisation that doesn't reflect any student views?
I'm really reluctant to get dragged into student politics, except to say that I'm with you in part. I wasn't hugely involved in student politics at university. I found it a little bit a certain group of people who hijack a cause, often political careerists in their own parties, which I've got a feeling you're sort of standing against, and I sort of recognise that to some extent. And I certainly, some of the anti-Semitism that's gone on, particularly, I think is very, very worrying.
Right, but do you support what Tom is actually trying to do?
Well, I know, for example, that there are some real issues around the cost of student housing. that's something that, you know, you'd hope to see the NUS really taking up much louder, in a sense,
And do you-
than some
do
of the
you think
positions it takes globally.
And doesn't
Do
the
you think
NUS
if they-
do that, though? I mean, it has campaigned on things like
Not loudly.
expensive housing and
Well,
accommodation.
I think the NUS is undermined on the legitimate issues when it uses the NUS conference as a platform to call for the bringing down of the government, as every single vice president seems to do. All of the people within the NUS come from the same political opinion, and they rail against the government, and sometimes perhaps they should focus on presenting a broader spectrum of student opinion that actually exists.
What do you think?
Well, I think sadly the NUS has lost credibility and legitimacy because of a cabal of people who are misrepresentative of the body of students and have given it a really bad name actually in wider society. And it's a real shame. I was involved in student politics.
You were?
And I saw it as a great opportunity to learn more about...
How did I know that?
Hopefully I defy the stereotype that you put forward. But no, it was a
I was
great
having
opportunity to learn. It was fun. We campaigned, we helped in
You missed
elections.
out, David, obviously.
Massive fail.
Do you
yeah.
have any support, by the way?
In terms of nationally?
Yes, or even at Durham. I mean, I know you've been elected
won
because
in a
people liked your
landslide
video.
victory.
But
Yeah. No, I mean, generally, there was 300% increase on turnout, but the turnout was still only 10%. I mean, students generally just don't care about this kind of stuff, and that's what I'm trying to highlight. But what's really interesting is that around the country, on campuses up and down the country, more people are sort of starting to emulate campaigns like this. So we might see a really good batch of anti-establishment delegates sent along to the conference this year in April, which should be really exciting.
All right, Tom Harwood, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.